Sometimes you have to think of your workplace like the Game of Thrones. Alliances are formed, rivalries are developed, and influence is the ultimate currency. The difference instead of swords and dragons, you need to be with the right communication skills, confidence, and the right strategy. So if you're like me and you don't even know who Game of Thrones is, well, you much were like me when I first started off in my career because I didn't have the scratch strategy, nor the communication skills, not a clue what office politics was, and even when I found out, didn't want to be bothered with it. I'm just gonna say that up front. I'm gonna be truthful about it. All right. Speaking truth tonight, speaking truth tonight. Hi, and welcome to my channel. I am Dr. Twanna, and I am an executive coach for Black. Today, we're talking about office politics. And if it just makes you want to clutch your pearls and say, no, I understand, I understand, I understand. I remember talking with my mentor saying, look, I'm not good at office politics. Maybe this is something I need to get into. And he just looked at me and said, well, you better learn it. And so that was about all the instruction I got about how to handle office politics. Anybody else out there have had someone I got a comment out there. Okay. Got one out there. There we go. Anybody else out there have never had anybody to actually sit you down and say, here's how you handle office politics. When you see this, don't do that. Do this or that or the other. If you have had someone to tell you how to handle office politics, drop a P in the comments. Just drop that P for me, right? I didn't I didn't get a mentor till I was 49. So I didn't have that instruction, which is why I'm kinda doing this particular live because a lot of us don't get this, right? We just don't get it. So what is office politics and why is it such a challenge, right? Office politics is the invisible game that's happening in every workplace. Who holds the influence, how decisions are made, and what is unspoken. Oftentimes it is unspoken. It is the unspoken rules that really shape your career, unless you're like me and didn't have a clue. And then by the time I learned, I was like, "Yeah, I don't wanna bother with that." But that was also to the detriment of my career, right? So I'll just say that up front. You have to learn what it is and understand how to maneuver it. I'm not suggesting that you jump into the fray of it because many of you may be like me. I say that I was Rodney King before Rodney King was Rodney King. Can we just all get along? Can we not just all get along? And unfortunately, that doesn't happen in the workplace. So we're gonna share some things today to help you out. The challenge is this: if you don't understand the game, you risk being overlooked, me, undervalued, also me, or even pushed out of opportunities, sadly, also me in my earlier career. How can it negatively impact you? Have you ever been passed over for a promotion despite knowing you've worked really hard and understanding that you knew more, right? You knew more. You knew way more. Anybody else, anyone else have experienced that? Raise your hand in the comments. So just say me. Just say me, right? Um, you know, or have you ever felt like your ideas get dismissed in meetings? That's office politics at play. And ignoring it does not make it go away. Believe me, I know that's the biggest mistake that I made starting off in my career. Ignoring it just puts you at a disadvantage. So you have to understand and recognize the different players in the game. If you don't know who holds influence, you won't get to show, you won't know how to navigate key relationships. And we're not talking about we're not talking about ain't not about brown nosing, right? Brown nosing is something separate is over here and not even gonna cover that tonight, right? We're not talking about brown nosing, we're actually talking about building relationships with the right folks and knowing what to say at the right time. Yeah. So have you ever felt certain people always get ahead, that's because they understand the who, in other words, who the decision makers are. I never will forget, I was working for the Birmingham VA, and I moved to a separate office from where my boss was, and one of the nurse managers there was totally awesome. She was such an awesome lady, and she started talking to me about where do you wanna go? I mean, do you wanna do this for the rest of your life, or do you wanna move up? And I was like, "Yes, I'd like to move up." And so what she told me was, she would say, "So she actually told me, "You need to see this person," she told me his name, and she said, "Even though this one is in charge, he is not the decision maker. You need to go to his second in command because that's where the decisions are made, and he's a power mover." I would never have known that. I I wouldn't have known that. She was nice enough to sit down and start like, if you want this career path, this is a person you need to speak to. This is a person whose or you need to be. And up to this point, I got FaceTime with my boss's boss because that's what they tell you to do. And come to find out he wasn't a decision maker. He was not a key decision. So it really is important for you to understand who the decision makers are. And it may not always be the person in charge. Yeah. Do you find it a struggle to speak up and be heard? Remember that confidence isn't about being the loudest voice in the room because I actually thought it was, and therefore I thought I lacked confidence, and that was the whole entire thing in the beginning of my career because I wasn't the loudest voice in the room. I was never going to be the loudest voice in the room. But rather, confidence is about knowing and understanding your value and showing up with commitment. But what if you do feel unheard, overlooked, or dismissed? That's where strategy comes in, right? Because if you've ever spoken up in a meeting only for someone else to repeat your idea like 5, 10, 15 minutes later, and they get all the credit for it, it just it burns. It sucks and it burns, and I've had it to happen before. But I tell you what happened more times than not for me. I wouldn't speak up. And the same exact idea that I had, someone like 5 minutes later said it, and they got all this credit, all this thing, and I'm sitting there going, "Hey, but I had that idea." 'Cause you lose, right? You lose if you speak up. You lose if you don't understand strategy and you speak up and someone else gets the credit for it, right? That feeling of invisibility is demotivating, and it is so frustrating, and it's time to actually change that. Here's how to communicate effectively and set boundaries, right? So number 1, speak with clarity. And I gotta tell you, I have social anxiety, and I also stuttered, and I stuttered when I was really nervous. So course, when I'm in a meeting, I was really nervous and trying to speak up. But that also meant that I was when I did start to talk, it was like rambling, just a whole bunch of words thrown together. And then to make words, I was stumbling over the words, and all that, which I just felt like I sounded like a right. I probably did, but in my mind, I felt like I did, right? Rambling loses people. Precision and clarity in your communication earns respect. You don't believe me? Think about the last time some guy has spoken up in a meeting and said something, everybody's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And in retrospect, you listen to it and go, "That was stupid. That didn't even make sense." You I Give me a 1 in the comments if you've been there, even if you're watching the replay, if you've been in a meeting and some guy says something that is, like, really make no sense at all, but people are like, "Yeah, that's right." Why did they do that? Because he said it with clarity, he said it with confidence, and he said it with precision. It didn't make sense, but he said it with clarity, he said it with confidence, and he said it with precision. That's how important it is. Number 2, you'll also want to use I statements in tough conversations, right? You know, especially if you gotta have this conversation with your boss, and I can tell you, it's scary because I've had to have this conversation, right? And no one told me at the time, "How do you do this? How do you say it?" So here it is. You can say, I feel my contributions aren't being recognized. And I like to discuss how I can be more involved, because it sounds so much better than and again, I would get nervous and I would stutter. And so what came out, I would be embarrassed, I would be judging myself, and then I would just kind of go mute, and my boss would be looking at me like, "Are you doing something?" So I know I've been there, right? So that's the way that you say that, right? Because let's be honest, workplace conflicts are draining, and they are stressful. So we don't always want to speak up. At least I do, because again, I have social anxiety and I don't like workplace. But sometimes you can speak and you can say it in a certain way where, yes, you're saying you're pushing back, but it's not like this huge conflict. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about workplace conflicts right now. Because again, they're draining and they're stressful. And then there's gossip and there's miscommunication and there are power struggles in the workplace. So you have to recognize all of these things when tensions are rising. Conflict can be career damaging if it's not handled right. So, what are the consequences of poor conflict management? Well, avoiding conflict doesn't make it go away. I know that because I tried it over and over. It actually just makes you a target. And especially as women, and especially Black women, handling conflict aggressively can burn bridges and damage your reputation, right? And so let's just talk about the elephant in the room. As women of color, especially Black women, when you push back, you're automatically seen as angry, right? You're seen as difficult. So, understanding that it is really, important for you to understand how to voice and how to speak and say what you got to say. And we're not talking about picking words and making people feel good around. We're not talking like that. Say what you got to say, but say it in such a manner with the I feel statements, with the facts there, and say, how can we work on this? Right? It's better than going off the deep end and cussing out because 'cause I'm sick and tired of all of y'all, because you don't really get anywhere, although sometimes in the moment you might feel like you got somewhere, it just felt good to get it all off your chest, but the repercussions typically don't go well, right? And it can, again, damage your reputation. My sister often talks about in past careers how she's seen folks just go off and cuss everybody out in the room, and she would sit there and go, "As a Black woman, I could never and get away with it. I could do it, but I couldn't get away with it, and it would be damaging to my reputation." That's just the way it is for us, right? And so what you wanna do, here's how to resolve conflicts without losing professionalism, right? That's the big thing, because we do need to address the conflict, and sometimes you can cause it, but it's the way that you handle it that's fine, because there is no such thing as a workplace without conflict. We're all different human beings. There will always be conflict. It is about how you experience it and how you handle it. So instead of reacting emotionally, you gotta approach conflicts with curiosity, right? So instead of, "I feel like I'm invisible," try something like, "I've led several successful projects, and I want to ensure that my work is visible to others at the leadership level. How can we create more opportunities?" Right? So, no one's going to accuse you like, "She's just angry, she's attitudinal." No, because you're like, you pointed out what you did. You started off with the fact. I've done this, I've led this, I've been successful in this, let's do this. You're starting out with facts, so you're totally in the facts side of the house, right? And then you end up with the question, how do we create more opportunities for me to get to key leadership? Hard to argue with that, right? Very hard to argue with that. It's a great way to approach it. So by now, you're probably wondering how you can advocate for yourself and career growth. Because I told you some things, I told you about the conflict and, you can't avoid it, and I tried it, it don't work, so I'm just telling you now, it really does not work. But it is about learning to advocate for yourself and your career growth, especially when you're not getting the recognition that you actually deserve. And I gotta tell you, I also tried this, being quiet don't work either. Oh, I'll just work 5 times harder, I'll work 2, 3 times harder, and then I'll get noticed. No, that doesn't work either. Tried it, didn't work, right? You actually deserve the recognition. So, number 1, you gotta be your own cheerleader. List your contributions and successes, and let me tell you, I spoke to you earlier about the guy who will say something that really makes no sense, and everybody's like, "Yeah," because he said it with conviction. Well, the reason why people will trust him is because every time you turn around, he's talking about how good he is and what he's done. Now, I get that a lot of us don't wanna talk about how good we are because it just sounds braggadocious and sometimes makes you sound like a douchebag, which we can all attest to. We probably have worked with people in the office that sound like big douchebags walking around. So we're not talking about that, but we are talking about confidently listing your contributions and your successes. I'm dealing with a client right now. It's like I do all this work and everybody else takes credit. They can't take credit if you put that stuff in writing and you list it. You know, even if something as simple as if you're working with a customer who says, "Wow, really great job on this project for handling X, Y, Z." You stop right there, and you first of all, if you feel comfortable, ask them to send your boss an email with that. CC you on it. But if they don't, or you don't feel comfortable, don't worry about it. You put it in the email. It's cool. Hey, you know, address your boss however you address him or her, and say, "Just spoke with Mr. Whoever, Miss Whoever, what it was, and she really enjoyed this project. We just nailed this one. It makes the unit look good. And she was really happy with the work I done, or he was really happy with the work I done." You can do that. You don't have to wait for that person to tell your boss, and you can hope. You don't have to wait and hope and that your boss finds out. Put it in writing. To be honest with you, this is important for evaluations too. When it comes to evaluation, and most of us generally get an annual evaluation, and sometimes there's a 6-month point, and then you go and at the end of another 6-month point, you do the evaluations. The way the human brain works, you're only gonna remember things about the last 90 days. And if you screwed up in the last 90 days, guess what your boss is going to remember? The last 90 days, not all the great and wonderful stuff you did before that, but if you make it a habit of sending your boss notes or whatever, and if your boss does, like, one-on-ones, because a lot of bosses do that, you come in every month or whatever it is, do one-on-ones, then have that written out. Yeah, wanna be sure that you understand this. I worked with this, she said this. In the military, we call them attaboys and attagirls. Be sure that you're listing your contributions by sharing your attaboys and your attagirls, or in this case, attagirls, 'cause most people don't have problems with this, right? Share your successes with your boss. Write it down so that it is in writing, and it goes back to before, we're talking about addressing, like, doing all this work and it's visible. "Hey, I've done this," and now you can pull out those emails, print them off. It's like, "Hey, I did this person said that." Now you have documentation of your contributions, and you have documentation of your success. I also did this, and I coach my clients to do the same thing. You have to figure out how often you do it. But me, I would do it 2 to 3 times a week when I was, a W-2 employee, and sometimes all 5 days of the week, but no less certainly than weekly. I kept a Word document, and I each week, I had what my accomplishments were, what I accomplished and what I did and who I spoke to, right? So it makes it great because it's just easier if I was talking with my boss to slide something in the door because I knew who said it and who did whatever it was, right? Now I was fortunate enough that folks would come back and tell my boss, "I really appreciate her working on this." But again, they don't have to, but you can. All right. Number 2, again, be ready to articulate your successes and your contributions when the opportunity arises. So don't just keep it on a sheet of paper to yourself. Be ready to articulate. Practice looking yourself in the mirror and talking about what you accomplished. It is not bragging to say, "I accomplished this, and Mr. So and so, or Miss So and so, or the chief this, or CEO that, whatever it is, director, whoever it was really happy with this," right? And if you do it on the day that you're notified, you have a date timestamp, so you can go back and get that, right? And number 3, don't just because you work hard, people will automatically notice your work. It don't work. I know. I've done it. It didn't work. It did not work. And if it does work, it works to the detriment because people will go, "Well, she don't work that hard, and I ain't paying her anymore for that, and she's not getting recognition for it. Whoosh, let me give her some more." And that's normally what I got. Working harder, 2, 3 times harder got me more work, but not the promotion, right? So, please stop assuming that just because you work 2 3 times harder, it's gonna make people say no. No, it doesn't, right? Or if it does, they will just give you more work, but end up contributing to other people, and they get the promotion and you don't, right? If you do not advocate for yourself, no one else is gonna do it for you, for the most part. So you have to get used to doing it for yourself. It's not bragging, it's not being cocky. No, it is not any of that. It is just stating fact. What you did, reminding your boss. And that way, when it's time for again, it rolls around, it's time for your evaluation. You have all these emails that you can now pull up and remind yourself and your boss of the work you did here, right? And of course, here's the other thing. This is what I see a lot. When people have sat silent in their careers and not said anything, and people are taking their ideas or stolen their ideas, gotten awards for their ideas. Yes, I've seen that happen. Um, when you say, "All right, enough is enough," I'm going out and find another job. I promise you that the cost of staying silent is just too great. Because when you go for another job, you don't have the confidence to speak up for yourself, right? You've done the work, but others are getting ahead. If you don't ask for what you deserve, you will continue to get passed over even when you're negotiating for yourself for another job. So you gotta learn to do it where you are, right? And you can do it where you're on your way out if you're at that point, because that's normally just like when I decided to leave one. I was like, "Oh, well, I'm not getting credit for this." And then when I did speak up, it was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, whatever," and just brushed off. I was like, "Okay, it's time for me to go." But over time, I actually learned how to do this, and it really does work. Writing it down, I gotta tell you, one of the best things I did was I did keep up with and I do that now, now that you think about it. I own 2 businesses. I still keep up with what I do on a daily, if not daily, about 4 days of the week. I still keep up with what I do. I don't have to report to anybody what I've done, but I still do this. I keep up with my own stuff, right? And so that when I talk to my clients, I can bring up instances where I was successful with my clients. So you gotta do that, right? You gotta be able to negotiate and advocate for yourself, right? So when we're talking salaries, and a lot of times your work is overlooked and you don't speak up when it comes time for a raise, you don't get anything at all, or you don't get as much as you want. So you do have to understand to research the salary benchmarks. Understand, sometimes you can find out what others in your company is making, and sometimes you can't, but understand what the research the salaries and understand what the benchmarks say, right? Number 2, practice your pitch because it is like you may not be getting another job, but sometimes it's like a full all out pitch. You gotta pitch your boss like, "I deserve this. You talk about a 2% raise, but I've done this." And again, if you've been keeping up every week and you've been sending those emails, now you can track out all of that stuff and say, "Here's the things that I've done." Be prepared with quantity, with your quantitative, like your facts, your percentages. I did this, improved by this much, saved this much, saved the company this much money, increased revenue by this. All of that goes in when you're practicing your pitch. Number 3, don't be afraid of silence. Make your ask, right? Make your pitch and then sit in silence. Make silence your friend and let him or her, or your boss or whoever it is, process your ask. And I tell you what happens when people most folks are uncomfortable with silence. When you rush to jump in and fill in the space, you start the gibberish stuff, and you're not making sense, and they're just looking at you like, "See, that's why I haven't given you this raise. You're not making sense to me." So you don't wanna do that. Make the pitch, be sure you've researched, make the pitch, and then just be silent. And if you have a problem with silence, as most people do, right? Just wiggle your toes because it's one of the techniques that I teach my clients on both in both my businesses of how to diffuse anxiety, right? You can also do some light breathing. Just be sure you're taking those nice, deep, long, deep breaths in and long, deep breaths out. And then let them speak, right? Let them process it first and then speak it. Because if you bombarded them with facts, you got all these emails and all these percentages, it makes it hard to say, well, no, because you haven't, because they can see clear that you have. So let them make that first. Let them process your ask and then let them speak first, right? Because office politics, right, can feel exhausting when it seems like you're jockeying is not really your thing to do, right? So it does seem like it can feel exhausting. So you can diffuse the tension, understand how to share credit with others. And I get folks that they just do so much better at giving other people credit. It's fine to do that, but talk to the people you're giving credit to and say, hey, the next go round, you do that for me, right? And it will work. And especially if you're in a meeting and you say something, you just get crickets, and then someone else says, and everybody's like, oh, look how good that is. Have your ally say, yes. And Lisa just said that same thing 5 minutes ago. I'm so glad she shared it to give you the idea. Have your advocates help you out so that you're not some of us still feel uncomfortable about tooting our own horns, but you really should get over that. But it is great when you can share the credit and have people uplift you, and then you return the favor by uplifting them. Most of us are cool with that. We just feel way better by doing that. So do it more, right? And then also you want to build relationships based on trust, not just strategy, because it's easy because I'm a left brain person. So I'm all about the science and all the data and everything. And I like to jump in with both feet. But you do have to understand that relationships are built on data, right? And so you do need to understand the people you're working with, build those relationships, get to know them, right? And I often, coach my clients that when you're setting up your office, you just got that job, and you're trying to figure out what to do in your office. Be intentional about the things that you set in your office, on your walls, and on your desk. They should tell people what you want them to know about you, right? And also when you go in other people's office, read the room by looking at what they have up, because often it does person. Now, I do have clients that say, "Actually, I'm not putting nothing up in my office. I don't wanna know because I don't like to know that." And when you don't have anything in your office and someone walks in to talk to you, you're leaving it up to them to make a decision about you. You're leaving it totally up to them. Personally, I'm I tend to be a quiet person, believe it or not, when I'm not doing this. I tend to be a quiet, I'm an introvert. But I don't want nobody making decisions about me and labeling me. I need to make that decision. I need to determine what you know. And so, again, putting relationships based on trust, learn about the people with you, and then set your office up to speak what you want to say to people. Because a blank office means they get to make up their mind about you based on their own stuff. And well, most people tend to get that wrong, right? So, but how do you stay professional? Like, let's move to this one without feeling like you're playing a manipulative game. We talk okay, so that was a nice way to say I think that was pretty good. I mean, if you say that the like the professional way. So how do you stay professional without feeling like you're playing a manipulative game? So eat street talk, how do you not be a brown noser? All right. How do you not kiss A? How do you not come off as kissing people's bums? Right. I think that was a really nice way to say that. I mean, let me know if you agree with me there, right? I think it was a really so most of us don't want to be manipulative, we don't want to be brown noses either. I did want to be either of those. You know, you have to learn to set boundaries because if you don't set the boundaries in the workplace can consume you, right? If there are things that are off limit to you that you just don't do, then don't do, right? And explain short explanation of why. Sometimes it does need an explanation. Sometimes I just don't, right? I'll be honest with you. People don't cuss me out. That was my thing. That was a trigger for me. You don't get to curse me. You just don't do that, right? And I've spoken to folks who people walking, their bosses walk in the office and they're dropping their phones and calling them stupid. Couldn't be me, right? Could not be me. And it's strange because again, I have social anxiety and I'm an introvert, so I'm very quiet. But that was a trigger for me, so that can't be me. So I was just like, I don't, I speak to you with respect and I don't use profanity with you, and you need to observe and do the same with me. I was just very upfront. There's just some things I don't do, right? So there are things that you don't do, then don't do those things. And those are boundaries that you need to communicate to people because you can't expect them to adhere to your boundaries if you don't communicate. If you don't build allies, you'll feel isolated as well. So yes, create your boundaries around the things that you do or you don't do. Like some folks, like I did not do happy hour when I first joined the military. I don't drink and I still don't drink, right? And I didn't do happy hour. Now I've gotten to the place now where I'm okay going and I'll get my orange juice and my cranberry juice or whatever. But my drugs is not to be around it. Just me personally, that's just me. Um, but some people don't because they're recovering alcoholics, and they can't be around the smell, they can't hear the ice clinking in glass, they can't smell the cigarette smoke, they can't do any of that without coming close to relapse. So, you don't have to tell people all of that, but set your boundary because you have a right to set those boundaries. And again, build allies so you can have other people, you know, speaking up for you or speaking on your behalf as well. Right? And so here's how to really foster a healthy work-life balance because office politics can make you feel like you gotta put 150% into everything and give it your all just to get ahead. So no, Woosah, don't do that, right? You do need to, however, prioritize your work-life balance, set the limits, and engage with politics strategically. Again, not emotionally, or else you'll find yourself trying to fight every single battle, and that gets annoying. It is draining, and it is you get burned out, right? So, being in the workplace is just like a Game of Thrones again. The power isn't just given, sometimes it's taken, it's earned, and it's cultivated through strategy and through building relationships and also building your confidence. So go out there and find your voice and play the games on your terms, because don't take anything that I've said here that you got to play someone else's game. I didn't, I never have, and I never will, but you don't have to. You play it on your terms, what is comfortable for you, right? Because mastering office politics is just about survival. It is the key to advancing your career again on your own terms. So my VIP roadmap session is more than just a consultation. It is actually the first step toward building your influence, advocating for yourself, and for positioning yourself for success, right? So go ahead and book your session. Right now it's free for a very limited time, because knowing how to navigate the workplace dynamic is the difference between being overlooked and becoming a leader, the leader that you want to be in the position and the role that you want to see. I'll see you in the next. Thanks for watching. Ready to turn today's clarity into real progress? I'd love to support you. Click the link in the descriptions to connect. I'm Dr. Tawana, an executive coach for Black women, and I'll see you in the next one.